Have you ever noticed the strange and silent weight that comes from always being the one to reach out? What if the exhaustion you feel in your heart is not from the effort of sending a message, but from the quiet, terrifying realization that if you stopped trying, the silence would become permanent? Most of your suffering is not caused by the silence itself. It is caused by how desperately you are trying to fill it. If you have ever felt emotionally drained from carrying the entire weight of a relationship, if you have ever felt invisible in a friendship you fought so hard to save, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this silent ending forever. You know the feeling intimately. You are the friend who remembers the important dates. You are the one who checks in after a hard week, who initiates the plans, who sends the message just to say, you are thinking of them. You are the anchor. But anchors are meant to hold a ship steady during a brief storm. They were never meant to drown in the dark water forever, just to keep someone else from drifting away. Slowly, without even realizing it, you have become the sole caretaker of a bond that requires two people to sustain. You wait for the reciprocity that never comes. You make excuses for their absence. They are busy. They are stressed. You tell yourself that if you just hold on a little longer, give a little more, the balance will return. But in Buddhist thought, there is a profound teaching about the nature of our suffering. Much of our pain does not come from the natural shifting of life, but from our deep, relentless resistance to it. We suffer because we cling to how things used to be, or how we desperately want them to be. We mistake attachment for love. We believe that caring deeply means holding on tightly, even when our hands are aching and our spirits are tired. Buddhism reminds us that when we try to force an outcome, we are no longer loving. We are trying to control. We are pouring our precious energy into an empty space, hoping the echo of our own voice will sound like a conversation. Imagine standing on the bank of a gentle river. The water flows naturally, finding its own path, moving around stones and roots. If you step into the current and try to push the water, or cup it in your hands to keep it from moving away, it will simply slip through your fingers. You cannot force the river to stay. Friendships are like this water. Some flow alongside you for the entire journey, while others naturally curve away into a different valley. Trying to dig a trench with your bare hands to force the water back to you will only leave you exhausted and broken-hearted. Think about your own life. Think about the quiet anxiety you feel when wondering why your absence goes unnoticed. We often take this silence personally. We internalize the distance. We wonder if we are broken, if we are not worthy of effort, or if we are simply easy to forget. But ask yourself, is this thought bringing you peace, or is it feeding your fear? Are you carrying the entire weight of a bridge that the other person has already stepped off of? Pause, breathe, let that sink in. Observe the quiet exhaustion in your chest without judging it. You do not have to be the endless source of effort. You can let the feeling of grief rise without making it your entire identity. Do your part in this world. Love openly, but then you must learn to release the outcome. Because peace is not something you chase by trying to win someone's attention. It is something you make space for, when you stop forcing what is no longer meant for you. But deciding to stop reaching out, to finally let your hands rest, forces us to confront a very specific fear. And this is where the next truth begins. 2. The fear of what happens when you stop trying. What if the hardest part of letting go is not losing the other person, but facing the profound silence that follows when you finally step back? Here is the truth few people want to face. You are not necessarily afraid of giving up. You are terrified of discovering that if you stop making an effort, the connection will completely disappear. The tighter you hold, the more you suffer. You keep checking in, sending the casual text, forwarding a memory, or asking how their week is going, not just because you care, but because you are trying to outrun a deeply painful realization. You fear that if you put your phone down and wait for them to come to you, you will be waiting forever. You are terrified that your absence will be met with complete indifference. And so, you keep working, you keep initiating, you keep carrying the full weight of the relationship, preferring the exhaustion of one-sided effort over the devastating clarity of total silence. In Buddhist thought, much of our inner turmoil is tied to the illusion of control. We believe that if we just do enough, care enough, and reach out enough, we can preserve a bond that is naturally fading. We try to control the feelings and actions of another person through our own relentless effort. But one of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the practice of observing reality without trying to manipulate it. When we desperately try to force a connection to remain alive, we are running away from the truth of the present moment. Non-attachment does not mean you stop loving your friend. It simply means you stop trying to control their journey, and you stop demanding that they walk at your pace. Imagine you are holding one end of a long, heavy rope that stretches across a wide river. For years, you have been pulling it, feeling the tension, believing the person on the other side is holding their end just as firmly. But one day, the tension changes. You keep pulling, your hands blistering and your arms aching, terrified that if you let go, the rope will sink. But if you were to truly look, you would see that the other person has already laid their end of the rope on the riverbank and walked away. You are not holding on to a connection anymore. You are only holding on to the heavy, sinking weight of your own effort. Think about your own life in this modern world. Think about the heavy feeling in your chest when you look at a screen, waiting for a reply that never comes, while seeing that they are perfectly capable of being present for other people. It is a quiet agony to realize that someone can reach out, but is simply choosing not to. Ask yourself, what are you afraid will happen if you simply do nothing? Are you truly afraid of losing them? Or are you afraid of facing the undeniable truth that they are already gone? Is your effort bringing you true connection, or is it only feeding a cycle of anxiety and disappointment? Pause, breathe, observe the desperate urge to reach out and fix the silence, and let that urge pass like a cloud drifting across the sky. Stop trying to force the door open. If a door is meant to be open, you will not have to break your spirit trying to unlock it. Let the reality of the moment sit with you. You do not have to chase what is already leaving. You can stop pulling the rope. But when you finally let your hands rest, a new and deeply misunderstood pain arises, because beneath the fear of stopping your effort is a very specific, lonely sorrow. And this is where the heaviest truth begins. 3. The heaviest grief of a silent ending. What if the most agonizing goodbyes are the ones that are never actually spoken? Here is the truth that leaves so many of us quietly broken. When a relationship ends in a fiery argument or a definitive betrayal, you are handed a clear reason to walk away. You have a breaking point. But when a friendship simply fades into silence, you are left wandering in a room with no doors, searching for an explanation that does not exist. We are not taught how to grieve the living. We are not taught how to mourn a connection that just slowly evaporates. You find yourself scrolling past their name, seeing that they are alive, happy, and continuing their life just entirely without you. There was no big fight. There was no dramatic falling out. One day, the replies just got shorter. The time between messages grew longer, and suddenly, you became strangers who happened to know all of each other's deepest secrets. The pain of this silent ending is incredibly heavy because it lacks a definitive period at the end of the sentence. You are left holding a book that simply stopped mid-story, torturing yourself by wondering if you missed a crucial chapter. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that suffering thrives in the spaces where we demand certainty. We deeply crave closure. We believe that if we just had one final conversation, one clear explanation of what went wrong, the pain would dissolve. But one of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is that seeking external closure is just another form of attachment. We suffer because we refuse to accept that silence is, in itself, a complete answer. True peace comes not from forcing the world to explain itself to you, but from accepting the reality of the present moment, even when it is quietly devastating. Imagine a small wooden boat tied to a dock on a very still lake. A storm does not come to rip the boat away. There are no crashing waves or violent winds. Instead, over a long period of time, the gentle, constant rocking of the water slowly loosens the knot. Thread by thread, the rope gives way. And one quiet morning, the boat simply drifts away into the mist. It was not destroyed. It was not violently stolen. It just quietly untethered. Human connection can be exactly like this. Think about your own life. Think about the mental energy you spend replaying past interactions, dissecting every word, searching for the exact moment the knot began to loosen. In a world where we are always connected, it is a bizarre and lonely grief to be actively ignored. You see them viewing your life from a digital distance, yet they remain entirely absent from your actual reality. Ask yourself, what are you still holding on to? Are you waiting for an explanation that will never arrive? Are you delaying your own healing by demanding a final conversation that the other person is simply unwilling to have? Is this endless mental loop bringing you peace or keeping you trapped? Pause. Breathe. Observe the heavy sadness in your chest without following the thoughts attached to it. You do not need their words to validate your grief. You can mourn the fading of the light without needing to know exactly how the candle went out, because true closure is never handed to you by someone else. It is something you must cultivate quietly within your own heart. But to find that peace, we must first look deeply at the very nature of why people enter and leave our lives. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The truth of impermanence in human connection. What if the people we love were never meant to stay forever, but only for the exact amount of time our paths needed to cross? Here is a truth that is deeply uncomfortable to accept. We are conditioned to measure the value of a friendship solely by its duration. We are taught that a true connection is one that lasts a lifetime, and if it fades away, it means something went terribly wrong. You look back at the memories, the deep conversations, the laughter shared during difficult years, and you feel a profound sense of failure. You wonder what you could have done differently. You assume that because they drifted away in silence, the bond must have been an illusion, or worse, that your presence was simply not enough to make them stay. The modern world tells us to hold on to our people fiercely, so when the silence falls, we internalize it as a personal defeat. We carry the death of the friendship as if it were entirely our fault. But Buddhist wisdom offers a deeply liberating perspective. At the heart of Buddhist thought is the understanding of impermanence. Everything in this universe is in a constant, natural, and sometimes painful state of flux. The seasons change, the tides pull back, the weather shifts, and human hearts evolve. We suffer immensely when we demand permanence from a world that is designed to change. Expecting a person to remain identical year after year is like expecting the sun to never set. When we embrace impermanence, we realize that an ending is not necessarily a failure. Sometimes, a connection has simply reached its natural completion. Imagine a grand ancient tree in the middle of a quiet forest as autumn arrives. As the air turns cold, the leaves begin to dry and pull away from the branches. The tree does not grieve the falling leaves. It does not tighten its branches to trap them, nor does it weep when the autumn wind carries them to the ground. The tree inherently knows that those leaves provided vital nourishment for a specific season. Releasing them is not an act of abandonment, it is a necessary surrender. Letting them fall is exactly what allows the tree to conserve its deep energy of the winter and eventually to grow new life in the spring. Think about your own life. As you grow, your mindset shifts, your boundaries become firmer, and your emotional energy changes. It is entirely natural that some people who resonated with you in a past season of your life no longer align with who you are becoming. Yet, we take this quiet drifting deeply personally. We feel hurt that the friend who knew our past does not seem interested in our present. We cling to the ghost of who they used to be, ignoring the reality of the empty space they leave behind. Ask yourself, are you trying to hold on to a falling leaf? Are you punishing yourself because a beautiful connection simply ran its course? What if their silent departure is not a rejection of your worth, but merely the changing of a spiritual season? Pause. Breathe. Acknowledge the beauty of what the friendship was without demanding that it continue. You can hold quiet gratitude for the chapter they shared with you, while gracefully accepting that they are not meant to be written into the rest of the book. Because the end of a season does not erase the warmth of the sun that came before it. You can honor the past without carrying it like a heavy stone. But to truly let go, you must first stop carrying the guilt of their absence. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. Releasing the burden of self-blame. What if the heaviest weight you carry is a burden that was never yours to hold? Here is a truth that is quiet, yet profoundly difficult to accept. When someone walks away in silence, the mind's immediate instinct is to turn inward and attack itself. You replay every conversation. You scan old text messages looking for a hidden mistake. You wonder if you were too needy, too distant, too much, or not enough. The silence becomes a blank canvas, and in your grief, you paint it with your own perceived flaws. We convince ourselves that if we can just figure out what we did wrong, we can somehow regain a sense of control over a situation that leaves us feeling utterly powerless. You assume their silence is a direct punishment for your inadequacy. You believe that if you were simply a better friend, they would have stayed. In Buddhist thought, there is a deep understanding of how our minds manufacture extra suffering. The original pain is the silence itself. The secondary suffering, the arrows we shoot into our own hearts, is the narrative we build around that silence. Buddhism teaches us that another person's actions, or their lack of action, are born from their own journey, their own inner conditions, and their own invisible struggles. We suffer because we try to take ownership of a path that does not belong to us. We mistakenly believe that their inability to show up for us means we are fundamentally unworthy of being seen. Imagine a deep, incredibly still mountain lake. When the sky above is bright and clear, the lake reflects a beautiful, brilliant blue. When a dark, violent storm rolls in, the lake reflects the heavy, turbulent clouds. But the lake itself does not create the storm. It does not absorb the clouds and become the storm, nor does it blame itself for the darkness of the sky. It simply exists, holding its depth, remaining perfectly pure, regardless of what the weather decides to do. The darkness belongs to the sky, not the water. Think about your own life. When you see a friend slowly pull away, when you notice them engaging with the rest of the world, but remaining completely silent toward you, it is so easy to believe you are the broken piece in the equation. We live in a culture of constant comparison, where we are quick to put our own worth on trial. We bear the absolute guilt of a fading friendship, entirely forgetting that a connection requires two people to build, and only one person to let it fall apart. Ask yourself, how much of your current exhaustion is actually grief over the friendship, and how much is the sheer exhaustion of punishing yourself? Are you taking responsibility for someone else's inability to communicate? Is this cycle of self-blame bringing you peace, or is it just a desperate way to keep the ghost of the connection alive? Pause. Breathe. Observe the thought that you are at fault. and let it pass without claiming it as truth. Let the self-doubt rise, but do not invite it to stay. You do not need to solve the mystery of their silence, because you are not responsible for carrying the unspoken emotions of another human being. You can finally forgive yourself for not knowing how to save a bond that the other person had already quietly released. But stopping the self-blame is only the beginning of true freedom. To find deep, lasting peace, you must consciously choose what to do with the heavy rope you are still holding. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. The power of dropping the invisible rope. What if the freedom you are desperately seeking has been resting in your own hands this entire time? Here is the truth that feels completely counterintuitive. We often believe that letting go is an act of failure, a betrayal of our own loyalty. We think that if we stop holding on, we are abandoning the friendship entirely. But there is a profound difference between giving up and realizing that you have simply been fighting a battle all by yourself. Even after you stop sending the messages, even after you stop making the phone calls, you might still be holding on in secret. You keep a silent, exhausting vigil. You check their social media to see if they are active. You notice when they view your updates but say absolutely nothing. You wait, day after day, for an apology or an explanation that never arrives. You are still pouring your precious emotional energy into a ghost, confusing your quiet suffering with devotion. You are no longer holding on to a friendship. You are just holding on to an invisible rope, waiting for a pull from the other side that is never going to come. In Buddhist practice, true liberation begins with the mental and spiritual act of releasing our grip. The suffering we experience is deeply tied to our clinging. We cling to the past, we cling to our identities as the loyal friend, and we cling to the hope that they will suddenly realize our value and return. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us that this clinging is like tightly clenching a fist around a handful of sharp sand. The harder you squeeze to keep the sand from slipping away, the more it cuts into your palm. Letting go is not an act of cruelty toward the other person. It is the ultimate act of compassion toward yourself. Imagine a heavy stone that you have carried up a steep mountain for many miles. You were told it was a precious weight, so you bore it, letting it bruise your shoulders and exhaust your spirit. But when you finally pause to look at it, you realize it is just a heavy, lifeless rock. No one is forcing you to carry it anymore. The only thing keeping you tethered to this immense burden is your own refusal to set it down. You can simply open your hands and let it fall to the earth. The mountain will not collapse. The sky will not fall. You will only feel infinitely lighter. Think about your own life in this hyper-connected world. Think about the heavy stone you carry every time you silently monitor the digital ghost of someone who has walked away. We convince ourselves that if we just keep checking on them from a distance, we are somehow preserving the bond. We mistakenly believe that our quiet agony proves how deeply we can love. Ask yourself, what are you actually holding on to? Is it the reality of who they are today, or just the comfortable memory of who they used to be? What would happen if you simply gave yourself permission to stop caring about someone who is completely okay with your absence? Is this invisible rope bringing you peace, or is it slowly dragging you beneath the water? Pause, breathe. Imagine your hands slowly opening. Let the invisible rope slip from your fingers without a single ounce of guilt. You do not have to carry the weight of an empty connection to prove your loyalty. Because true peace is not found by proving your worth to someone who is looking the other way. It is found by quietly reclaiming your own energy. But once you release them, you are left alone, with the vast, aching capacity of your own heart. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. Honoring the depth of your own heart. What if the love you poured into those silent spaces was never a waste, but a profound reflection of your own beautiful capacity to care? Here is a truth that is easy to forget when you are hurting. It is incredibly common to look back at a silent ending and feel a deep, burning sense of embarrassment. You feel foolish for being the one who always checked in. You look back at the long messages you sent, the effort you made, the warmth you offered, and you cringe. You secretly wish you had been colder, more distant, more guarded. We live in a world that often equates caring less with having more power. So, when you are left standing alone, with a heart full of unreciprocated effort, you begin to view your deep empathy as a tragic flaw. You promise yourself you will never reach out first again. You start to build heavy emotional walls, deciding that if people are simply going to disappear, it is better to never let them in at all. But in Buddhist thought, closing your heart to avoid suffering only creates a different, more suffocating kind of pain. Buddhism teaches the practice of loving kindness not as a transaction, but as a pure state of being. The love, time, and effort you give to others is not a currency you lose if it is not matched. It is a brilliant expression of your own inner nature. When we view love as a transaction, we suffer the moment the ledger is unbalanced. But when we view it as our own radiant nature, we realize that our capacity to care is our greatest strength, regardless of how another person receives it. Imagine a single candle burning brightly in a quiet, entirely empty room. The candle does not withhold its light just because no one is there to sit beside it. It does not feel foolish for glowing in the dark. It simply does what it is naturally meant to do. It shines. The light is not diminished by the emptiness of the room, nor does it regret the heat it gives away. Your heart is like this candle. The love and effort you gave did not require an audience to be valid. The beauty was in the giving itself. Think about your own life. Think about the heavy walls you are trying to build right now, the way you are quietly trying to train yourself to be a little less warm, a little less available. We try to protect ourselves from the pain of being ignored by becoming the very silence that hurt us in the first place. We let the quiet departure of one person dictate how we treat the rest of the world, and more importantly, how we treat ourselves. Ask yourself, are you letting someone else's inability to show up change your fundamental nature? Why should their silence make you ashamed of your own beautiful, deeply feeling heart? Is closing yourself off bringing you true peace, or is it just trapping you in a dark, lonely fortress of your own making? Pause, breathe. Place a hand gently over your own chest and observe the steady, unbroken rhythm of your own worth. You do not have to apologize for caring deeply. You do not have to regret the times you reached out. Let your warmth exist without needing it to be validated by someone else's presence. Because your capacity to love was never the problem. It is, and always will be, your most profound gift. But realizing this means we must finally learn how to find peace in the quiet spaces left behind. And this is where the final truth begins. 8. Finding closure when no words are spoken. What if the silence that once felt like a profound rejection is actually the exact space where your true healing begins? We began this journey carrying the heavy, quiet exhaustion of always being the anchor. We explored the terror of dropping the invisible rope, the agony of the unspoken goodbye, and the heavy burden of blaming ourselves for a connection that simply faded away. We realized that our deep capacity to care was never a flaw, but a brilliant reflection of our own inner light. But here is the most liberating truth you will ever realize about a silent ending. You do not need the other person's voice to write the final chapter. We spend so much of our lives waiting for an apology that will never be spoken, or an explanation that will never arrive. We hold our own peace hostage, deeply believing that closure is a gift someone else must hand to us before we are allowed to move on. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that true closure is not a dramatic event. It is a quiet, internal surrender. It is the gentle practice of non-attachment, not just to the person who walked away, but to the fantasy of how the story was supposed to end. When you stop demanding that the past look different, you invite profound peace into the present moment. You realize that you can hold gratitude for what the friendship was, deeply love the memory of it, and still unconditionally release it. Imagine standing once again by that gentle river from the very beginning of our journey. For so long, you stood in the freezing water, fighting the current, completely exhausted from trying to force the water back to where it used to be. But today, you finally step out of the current. You stand on the solid, quiet bank. You watch the water flow away, knowing it is naturally moving exactly where it is meant to go. You do not hate the river for leaving, but you finally choose the warmth of the sun and the stillness of the solid ground over the endless, heart-breaking struggle of trying to hold on. Think about your own life right now. You have survived the silence. The absence you feared so deeply did not destroy you. You are no longer waiting for a message to validate your worth. You are no longer measuring your value by who chooses to stay and who chooses to quietly drift away. You are learning to stand in the deep, unshakable respect of your own heart. You are slowly realizing that you are worthy of connections that do not require you to constantly prove your value. Ask yourself, are you ready to finally step out of the water? Are you ready to forgive them for not knowing how to stay? And more importantly, to forgive yourself for fighting so desperately hard to keep them. Pause, breathe. Let the heavy silence of their absence be gently replaced by the quiet, comforting presence of your own self-respect. You have done enough. You have cared enough. The chapter has naturally closed, and the rest of your beautiful book is waiting to be written. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.